So want to talk about this role. So I've just touched on what's the role and the responsibilities of the compliance officer. I think for so long, compliance has been seen, and we'll all have heard some of these tropes over time, being the department of no, they're the business blockers. Compliance is always going to say no when you ask them something. Let's just not bring them in because you know what the response will be. And I would absolutely reject that, because I think oftentimes the issue for many compliance officers is not that they want to say no. The issue is that they are brought into the discussion at too late a stage, which means they have to say, well, actually, we can't do X or we can't do Y. Whilst if they had been brought in at a much earlier stage, then there would have been the ability to co-create, so that as the organization moves, so for example, it's introducing a new business line, it's moving into a new jurisdiction, it's making some significant changes. If they bring compliance into those discussions at the early stages, then it becomes a conversation around how can we do this so that the organization can grow safely, so that the organization can grow sustainably, rather than at the very late stages where compliance has to say no. And I think that there's something there in a lot of organizations about bringing compliance in at that first early stage to be around the table, to be able to contribute towards the discussions that are going on. Because ultimately, as compliance officers, your focus is going to be on ensuring that the organization does not violate laws, does not violate any regulations, does not violate any rules. And so if you have to say no because you've been brought in far too late, then ultimately that's not the fault of the compliance officer or the compliance department. That's the fault of how the business is negotiating and navigating, how it deploys and uses the compliance resource. And I think our mentality, or the mentality I think that compliance officers always should have, and I know all of you will do, is really around how do we get you what you want? How do we help you to move into that new area? How do we help you to develop that new business line? Let's think through this, and let's think about the guardrails that need to be in place to enable the business to do this and to do this safely. I can tell you from my experience of having undertaken investigations for corporates, but also having been on the other side of the fence, that investigations, whether they're regulatory or they're law enforcement or a combination of both, are a huge drain on the business. They're a huge distraction for the board, for all of the leaders in the business, because it's out of your control. And when the regulator says X, you have to ask how high. When you jump, you have to ask how high. And so we have to recognize that we have to put our compliance departments and our compliance officers in the strongest possible place to be able to help the business and protect the business as it grows. So for me, compliance officers and compliance departments are all about how do we do this, rather than it's a no.